Hey everybody, welcome back to Not Another Tooling Podcast with myself, Austin Pearson, and my co-host, Matt Malcolm. Matt, no treadmill this week?
Joe, I'm in a different office in a different country, and there's no treadmills here.
You look like you've got a nice little tan going on there, I've got to say. Weather must be better than the UK, that's for sure.
I haven't been out in the sun that much, you know. It's quite mild today. It was 30-something degrees before we arrived. It's mildly 20s or something now, and then it's 30-something next week. So we've missed it all.
Yeah, still far nicer than Bolton where I am anyway, for sure. And I'm just recovering from some virus, so hopefully I won't cough over too much of the episode today, but we're all good. So today we wanted to talk about an interesting thing that I am seeing a lot of at the moment, which is clients changing the way they're doing outsourcing and owning their own tools. So let me give you a few examples. So one client who has gone from a single outsourcer to 8 different outsourcers, so splitting up into multi-sourcing. One who's got fed up with their outsourcer and they're bringing it in-house. Another who's changing from one or outsourcer to another outsourcer. In all of these scenarios, the clients have decided that they are going to own their own monitoring tool, which is a change. They would previously have been part of outsourced contracts so that they can retain a level of control and visibility, which I think is really interesting. It speaks to the confidence or lack of confidence, I think, that customers seem to have with outsourcers these days. But also it's interesting that, you know, people who are outsourcing everything are saying, well, we're going to outsource everything, but we don't trust you with monitoring. So that's the one we're gonna bring in house. So lots to discuss. Matt, take us away for a minute. See what you're seeing. Are you seeing something similar? What are you seeing?
Historically, and the main reasons why I would see, and it could not even be the case of changing outsourcers. The outsourcer could still be in, and it might just be the next contract negotiation. They don't want to get rid of the outsourcer, but they do want to bring in control. And the reasons why, there's one other reason which we'll come to in a minute, but the main reason why is let's call it more flexibility. So generally, and I was one of the outsourcers in the past, when you're delivering a service with your own technology, really constrained, you know, it might be the best product in the market, which we see outsourcers are the best product in the market, but then you can't do fuck all with it. Like you can't really explore it because the outsourcer is constrained it to this is how they deliver the service, and it's cookie cutter across every single customer that they have. So you know there's a feature or there's flexibility, you never really get the chance to. So that's where I've seen it more so historically is outsourcing might not be changing, but they want to have some degree of extra flexibility. I wouldn't even call it control, but flexibility to enable them to do something more with this particular capability. We're talking about monitoring, but it could be a lot of my history, probably CMD, asset discovery, service management. That's a space where you can do a lot of things, but when you're on a multi-tenanted system managed by an outsourcer, you're throttled so much that it could be any product. It's pointless. But arguably, it becomes a selling point when the outsourcer is engaging, saying we've got all these products, but you never really get to use them how you'd like to.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely see that, and it's really interesting because so many outsourced contracts these days have a level of benefit to both parties when benefits are accrued. So if you were using a tool and you were only using a bit of functionality, and there was the ability to go use something else so that you improved MTTR, for example, both parties should get something out of that. But I agree with you. There is still, most outsourcers want to use tools in a very cookie cutter, same client approach, which makes sense.
Yeah, but I'm saying what's the point from a customer's point of view, really, because predominantly that's where I spend my time. But it's a badge of honor to have all these great products and solutions in their ecosystem to sell to the customer. But then you never really get into properly flex these solutions. Yeah, there's some benefits of standardization. Do you really see that in the bottom line a lot of the time? Do you really see that in the bottom line a lot of the time? So I feel like this level of throttling just diminishes the proposition in the first case, and then the actual value the customer might receive by using these great products is diminished. But there's other reasons. So the other reason, and I'd say I don't want to use the word lack of trust, but a lot of there's definitely distrust in a lot of relationships. But I'd say it's more so in just creating like a level field transparency. Because when we look at monitoring solutions, probably the best example of monitoring solutions is you can't really hide from the data. So it is what it is versus having, and I've seen it before, frequent reports, weekly, bi-weekly, quarterly, whatever, and they are service level type reports and uptime type reports with obscure data that's potentially feeding them. Well, get rid of that static level of showing the level of service and just show it in real time, as much as real time as you can be with the technology. So that's where I see it becoming more in the past, seeing it more relevant is to create this level of transparency, so each party knows actually where we're at. We are doing great, but we're not doing great. But you can't lie when you're looking at real data. So that's the other side of it, I see.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's where it that's definitely where it should be, because I think most outsourcers, whether you're a small MSP or a large outsourcer or whatever, the reporting on service level agreements is often done with a collection of spreadsheets and is almost a dark art. It's very hard to argue with that because you're like, okay, well, the numbers say this, but I think it's going to be like, we had this outage and this outage and whatever. Well, our spreadsheets say this, so that's the end of that. So I do think that transparency piece is going to be really interesting the more it's used, because there won't be anywhere for anyone to hide. But I do also think, just going slightly on a tangent here, but still on that piece, is if you've got more than one outsourcer, then you have this transparency problem even more, right? Because you're looking at two different sets of spreadsheets and from two different outsourcers, and when something goes wrong, where do you go to go solve the problem? Because neither of them want it to be them. Because it's obviously means service credits and all that kind of thing. So in that scenario, I kind of think it's either you force your outsourcers to all run the same tool so that you've got a single pane of glass, which is hard though, because
that's a hard story.
In a slightly different way, and do they have the skills? Probably not, because they're running different tools for different customers, etc. Owning it all yourself is probably the only answer to that question.
I think there is a middle ground, and I've actively observed. So I've been in a design process when this was getting fleshed out for a really large, complex customer. So the notion of all of the external parties, outsourcers, vendors, all sorts, feeding into this particular client, all using the same technology was what's the right word I want to use? A hope, a dream. Instead, where we got to in terms of expectation was having, what would I call it, a sort of federated framework of capabilities that had to have a common language once it arrived to the customer. So whether that was a monitoring, whether that was a ticketing system, whether that was a finance system in one case, whether that was a discovery product, there was a common requirement as part of the contract. So it was a contractual requirement that no matter what you've got in your estate, we need this information in this format, in this frequency. So it allowed the vendors and suppliers to be, a bit more flexible with whatever their products are, carry on operating the way they need to, as long as they conform to getting this common set of information across different capabilities into the central place. So the customer then was able to see everybody really in the same sort of language, and it meant that the vendors could still operate in isolation, autonomy with their own product, but then the customer had total view of what was going on and owned the data as well. That was a very complex piece of work because there was lots of outsourcers, like I don't know, 30, 40 or something. It was really, really choppy. But then that framework was like the rigid position, which ultimately fed into the contract as well, which allowed the customer to get what they needed, also without having to own a bunch of other products or ask vendors to change all their products. So that sort of blend worked as well. But the end goal, the transparency piece, the visibility, accountability was still met, just in a bit more of a complex way because it was a larger, more complex customer.
That is interesting, that. And I think that's a good potential way to go about it. You've got to be very strict.
Yeah, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of pages of design documentation. And, I absolutely hate documentation. So that was like really, really thrilling project. But yeah, really, really detailed and strict. Like, to the point where levels of the design material were part of the contract. It was very contentious levels of conversations. Some outsourcers, vendors essentially were not wanting to renew their contracts because of the detailed requirements. But then this particular client had, plenty of vendors and suppliers who wanted to support them, so it wasn't such a bad thing. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily think this is a good approach for everybody. No way. But that was a way to go about it and still meet the end goal.
Yeah, it's fairly time-consuming, I would imagine, contractually, and making sure that everybody is stipulating or staying to the stipulated rules, etc. For sure. Be good, but yeah, but it's interesting. I think it's probably been 18 months, 2 years now that I've seen this in a lot of the customers that I'm going to, that they are taking back their own version of control. And there's some good other things they can do with that. So I've got one particular client, several who take this approach, but one in particular I'm thinking of, where now that they have the information, the more information they provide to their outsourcer, the less they pay their outsourcer. So particularly around things like level 1, level 2 service desk calls. If they can use automation to avoid them, they're not paying anything for them. If they're ending up providing the triage data, they're saying, well, we're doing 60% of your work for you, so therefore we're going to pay you 60% less. And so they use these tools to drive down the amount they're paying their outsourcers, which I can't imagine the outsourcers are overly excited about.
No. That's dead sticky territory, that is, because I had a scenario not that long ago where the introduction of a solution would have and a part of this solution would have ultimately led for there to be a reduction in tickets. Yay, the nirvana, reduce the tickets, shift left, all the rest of that jazz. But when we got to the point where we was engaging with people who were also contract facing with the supplier, and in the contract they had a minimum commitment for the number of tickets created. So they couldn't really enforce and adopt the efficiencies in dealing with these things and reducing these tickets because they would be breaking contract, which had its own implications. Baffling, absolutely baffling. Never seen that level of engagement before, and that goes just crazy. So yeah, that's a sticky situation. But if you're in a new contract, a renewal contract position, absolutely, I think that's more than appropriate. But it depends on the drivers as well. We've talked about setting benchmarks and KPIs and measurements and things in the past. If that relationship is starting, or a renewal of that relationship is starting, and the benchmarks and the KPIs for that relationship are geared in a way where it's transparent and both parties sort of get what they want and see what they need to do, it's sort of more okay. But if you're in the middle of a contract, or the terms aren't in favour of you progressing as a business, then it almost becomes like a futile position to be in. What the efficiency is going to be there for, what you're going to see the detail for. It's anyway, going off on a tangent there, but yeah.
No, it's good, because that very much goes to something that we talk about a lot in this podcast, which is having clear KPIs when you're implementing a tool and knowing what you're trying to achieve. So if you're putting a tool in and one of your KPIs is to reduce your spend with your outsourcer, then you know what that is, you know where that spend is, and you have a very clear vision of what you want the tool to deliver out the back of it, which is probably reduced MTTR, high levels of automation,
Yeah.
etc., which do that, which is a great reason to do something, and a really good goal to have, and something you can continuously go back, keep looking at the data, and keep working out how you're going to improve that service, automate more, and pay even less to your outsourcer as a result, or have them spend the money somewhere else.
Yeah, but it's always going to be somewhere else. No one ever, the money's never saved. The money's never saved, right? The money goes somewhere else. I think it's almost the rule, right? But we've talked about the idea of the more strategic stuff and the goals and the strategies and all the rest of it, where this scenario could work. And I do think this is less of a technology driven activity. This, I think, the fine art in this kind of activity is a commercial activity. So, from a business point of view, maybe not everybody, but some, that the strategy should be this, and the supporting factors to support the strategy should be X, Y, Z. If you can get to the point where your outsourcer, your vendor, your supplier has a common interest in supporting those KPIs, and maybe they can get benefits off the back of supporting those KPIs, reducing the MTTR, increasing profit, whatever the things might be, if they're sharing the same and whatever they can do with you help improve that, and they also gain from that, then everyone's on the same sheet. So if you have to reduce the calls or be faster or whatever it might be, if everyone's got the same goal, like the goal needs to be transparent, then it's such an easy story, because it doesn't matter if there's any levels of contentiousness then, because everybody's working towards the same goal. Versus what have we seen in our history? These guys here want a load of stuff to make it really complex, and these guys want to reduce the complexity to, well, actually, if they're both going towards this like simplified view, which would be a simple set of targets depending on what the goals are for the business, doesn't matter. Like, if they agree this up front, and it becomes a much more healthy relationship, not what we've seen in the past, and I see you probably still know, is this service level reporting to say how well they're doing, and it becomes a fudge, as you say, of sets of spreadsheets, and you see an amber happen to turn green. I've seen so many ambers that just magically turn green the day before reporting is due. But if you've got a common goal, it eradicates it. Common data, common transparency, like it just makes it so much cleaner. So I do think this whole process is a commercial skill that would be needed in order to make it most successful. The technical aspect and the process, all the rest of it is nuance. If you can deal with it commercially, I think you're on a good state.
Completely agree. Wonderful. So today we have been talking about monitoring, bringing it back in-house when you're changing outsourcer or whatever it is. A lot of customers seem to be doing this to give themselves generally a bit more control, but also to give themselves more flexibility, because outsourcers often have constraints in the way they use tools. They have a very standard cookie cutter approach to it, so you don't necessarily get the benefits you need out of it. There's also a lot of this being used to bring transparency, so real-time dashboarding of the availability metrics, let's say, for something, which is really useful, particularly in a multi-sourcing environment, where you're trying to work out who is meeting their SLAs, or even at the basics, something's gone wrong, and who's responsible for it. There is a way to do this without tools, without new tools, which is around a federated language. And we've seen this work, but it's very time consuming and tough. So having a language in every outsourcer's contracts that says, you need to provide us this info in this format and this frequency, is one way to do it, but it's quite hard to do it. And then we talked about the when you're putting in a new tool, that actually this is a great place for you to commercially discuss with your outsourcer and come to some agreement on some joint KPIs. So if you've got some joint KPIs, then you can you'll be very clear about what you're working towards, and hopefully make sure that you end up with putting a new tool in and getting to some very verified outcomes that you both agreed in the first place, versus just having another new tool. Oh, how was a whistle stop tour today?
Good summary. I saw you like beginning to struggle there. I was like, oh, it is all right.
No, no, I was just still not quite 100%.
Done well.
Good, wonderful. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. What's your experience been with outsourcers? What are you thinking about doing with tools? Have you got any other topics you would like us to cover? Let us know. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.
Bye-bye.